Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Buck Stops here. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, we have certainly seen major swings in the equity markets this week, and certainly it's been a very rough start to the year, no doubt about that. A lot of uncertainty in terms of the U.S. Federal Reserve and whether or not they're going to be able to combat inflation by raising rates. It was interesting to see a bit of a relief rally when they did do that, but then, of course, we saw the markets see some significant losses yesterday. So I really wanted to provide some perspective in terms of the markets, the economy, geopolitics, and where we go from here. So who better to get some advice and thoughts and insight from other than Jim Rickards. He has been in the banking business since 1976. Important to give a lot of context and history here today. And also is, of course, the editor of the financial newsletter, Strategic Intelligence. Jim, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be with you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, why don't we first start with the U.S. Federal Reserve? That, of course, has been the big news of this week, and so much anticipation in terms of what they would do. And, you know, is it going to be the right move? I mean, is there going to be a policy mistake?
Well, there's going to be a bad ending. I wouldn't call it a policy mistake. The mistakes have already been made. And now we're at a point where we're like, okay, how do we get out of this? And, I hate to use cliches, but, between a rock and a hard place is probably as good as any. So the rock is a recession at best, maybe something worse, something more like a global liquidity crisis. The hard place is inflation, worse than what we're seeing already. Those are the Fed's two choices. This notion of a so-called soft landing where, we can raise interest rates a little at a time and get inflation under control, but keep the economy going. That's not going to happen. We're either going to have a recession or the Fed will at some point balk, not like what's going on in the markets, throw in the towel, in which case inflation will take off. Now, it's clear that Powell said, we're going to get rid of inflation. We're going to subdue inflation. We're not going to stop until that happens. Okay, that's a pretty clear direction. By the way, if you look at what Powell actually said, you got to be a little bit of a geek and watch the whole press conference and take notes and get a transcript and all that. Not the FOMC statement. That's a little bit. I know the guy who writes says it's a little cut and dried, but what Powell actually said, it was interesting. At one point, he said the U.S. economy is in great shape. Worse to that effect. But that was pretty much exactly what he said, which is nonsense. It's not in great shape. The people ask me, are we going to have a recession? And my answer is we might be in a recession right now and not even know it. U.S. growth, I'm talking about the U.S., but Canada, EU, Japan, and others are not much better. We could be facing a global recession, including China, but just focusing on the U.S. Because that's the Fed's sort of territory. First quarter growth was negative 1.5%. So we have that. We have the Atlanta Fed GDP estimate of second quarter growth. Second quarter's not over. We've got a few more weeks, and we won't know the actual number until late July. But they have a pretty good track record. It's not perfect, but it's probably the best tool out there. And they're showing second quarter as zero. Well, where I went to school, negative 1.5 plus zero equals negative 1.5. In other words, you're going to have a decline in growth for the first half. Based on where we are now. Now, things are getting worse, so that zero could tip into negative, in which case you could have 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP, and that is the definition of a recession. So my point being, we might be in a recession already. We'll find out later this year, but the data right now certainly points in that direction. So Powell saying the economy is great is nonsense. What he said, if you look at all of his other forecasts, he said, by the end of the year, we could be looking at 4.2% unemployment, 3.5 to 4% interest rates, and, kind of 2.7% inflation. And you're like, wait a second, inflation is 8.6 today. How do you get to, 2.7, number one? And then what about rising unemployment and higher interest rates? How do you reconcile those things? He said all three of those things. But what state of the world could make those things come true? There's only one, which is a recession. A recession would do it. A recession will raise unemployment. Higher interest rates will cause the recession, and the recession will cause inflation to go down. So in effect, Powell was saying we're going to have a recession. And this is why Wall Street reacted the way it did. Wednesday afternoon, it rallied, but that's just algorithms and short covering and some technical factors. Thursday, it sank like a stone. But that was people getting a good night's sleep, waking up and say, wait a second, he just told us we're going to have a recession. And my point is, not only is he right, we may be in one already.
All right, Jim, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what comes next. We'll be right back.